the pro forma, he actually said, well, how can you turn this around? And he had said, you have all these documents. Obviously, we had the evaluation report. We knew the area very well. And how can you turn this around to not make this a loss? And so that's when we prospected around the neighborhood with the zonage. And that's when we found the second project. So I guess the lesson is, whenever you find a deal or you purchase something, go to the immediate neighbors, get to know everybody around, and try to find a similar building, because you know what it's going to cost, you know what the purchase price is, the market, you know the rental market, and you can definitely make another deal out of your first.
Hello, and welcome back to the Very Real Estate Effect podcast, a show dedicated to real estate investing right here in Quebec. And today, I'm very honored to have Simon Kouperchand join us on the show. Hi, Simon. How are you?
Hey, how's it going? I'm good. Well, yeah. Finally on the show.
Yeah, exactly. And because you've been following this for what, like the last 2 years, we've been working together for quite a while now on various projects. And one of them in particular that we are going to share today, because it's gone through quite a few adventures. And before we jump into it, I just want to remind everyone, thank you for supporting us. Please leave us a rating and a comment, send us some feedback, send us some questions. And as we're planning for the new season, please let us know if you have any ideas of people you would like to hear on the show or topics you'd be particularly interested in. So feel free to reach out. There you go. So Simon, about last fall, we came across a project. Do you want to just share with us how we found it?
Yeah, sure. So we found a little development project back then. We were kind of tired of multi-res and wanted to get into something new. And I had my bird dog, a friend of mine, gave me an address that I researched and found the owner, and we kind of started talking.
And so what was the property? What state was it in, and where was it located?
It was a little fourplex in NDG, which was in really bad state. It was on a particularly good lot, I think about 6,000 to 8,000 square feet. And I prospected the owner, which ended up being a large developer for the city. So he takes on contracts from the city, builds parks, roads, all kind of all over Montreal. And I called them up on the office, returned my call. We're like, let's meet in the office. Axel, come along.
Yeah, and so we went over there. He was a nice gentleman, and he kind of shared the story with us that he had bought that from a gentleman that he knew a couple of years before. And it was, as you said, it was kind of a ruin of a fourplex to be developed into a 14 unit, if I'm not mistaken, and plans had been drawn back in 2019.
Yeah, exactly. So the apartments were completely bad. The roof was shot. We went in there with Axel. It was completely, it was it was squatted, and people were stealing wires. There was holes in between apartments. You saw there was water damage everywhere. It's quite an adventure.
When we visited, and we'll get back to that point where we actually did a visit, but we went from a unit to another unit, going through the walls, like in between the studs, ended up in a bathroom, and then restarted the visit and so on. But let's keep track. So we met with the owner, and we had a conversation, and he just said, hey, make me an offer. And he had kind of mentioned a price. I think he had mentioned about 1.2 million that he wanted. And so that's kind of what we started to work with. And that's what we made him an offer on, correct?
Yeah, so he said he had a buyer a couple of years back, if you remember, that they had a 1.2 offer, but it fell through because of financing. And after some negotiations, we decided that let's offer 1.5 with 500,000 in balance of sale till the end of construction.
For 2 years.
For 2 years, we would pay the construction permit, but he would take care of the demolition because he had a construction company. So we said, you take care of the construction, the demolition, and we would buy it land free with no building on it.
Yeah. And so exactly, just to summarize, like in the offer, we had put like obviously a 90-day due diligence, and that he was responsible for the demolition permit with the city, and we would take over the land once it had been demolished and evacuated. So just raw land, basically. And he was already working with an architect. So we started to work with this gentleman as well to try to make some tweaks, because since 2019 to 2021, when we started all this, some of the regulations had changed. And for example, the parking requirements had a lot been removed. So there was 6 or 7 parking spots in the semi-basement. And then the other half of the semi-basement was 2 or 3 units, if I'm not mistaken. And so we could remove all of the parking, and all we needed to do was to put a bike room, so we could fit 2 more units in there. So we started to make a few tweaks on the plans, worked with his architect, as it made sense to continue with him because he already had the file on. So then what happened?
So I think that's where our mistakes happened, is that the architect was playing us around. And at the end of the 90-day due diligence, we just had preliminary drawings. And, we went back to, we actually heard that the seller's partner told the architect, don't work on their file, they're playing. They're just going to waste our time. And so in the end, we didn't have any concrete, anything solid by the end of the 90-day due diligence, which we had hoped to at least progress quite a bit. And, we did the financial plans, the pro formas with an acquaintance that we knew that had a bit more experience than us. And in the end, it just didn't make too much sense. We didn't have enough land lift.
Yeah.
The evaluation came neck to neck, and we were always trying to buy a bit lower. So that's when we knew there was going to be a trouble with the financing, with the construction. So we went back to the seller.
You mentioned the land lift. Can you kind of define that for everyone who's listening?
Yeah. So just like in anything in real estate, you always try to buy under the value. So land lift is a bit similar. So let's say you're doing a flip, you're always trying to buy 75% of the value. So whenever you flip, you have something, you have that 25% equity. And so a land lift is a bit like that, but we were buying neck to neck to the evaluation price. So that's when we didn't have much room. We would have needed really solid financing. And at the time, it was kind of unknown how that was going to play out.
Yeah. Yeah. And so obviously we did a fair amount of research on the neighborhood, on the zoning, and what we could allowed to build. And one thing that you noticed was that there was no constraint on the number of units. It was just on frontage.
Exactly. So that's when I kind of started looking around.
We had said, let's prospect the entire zoning block. This zoning block is good. Let's see what else we can find here.
Exactly. And this is about the time where we felt like the deal was going to fall through a bit. And obviously we spent a lot of money on it. So we didn't want to give that up. We had evaluation reports. We kind of knew what was the potential on the land. So I went around the neighborhood. I kind of scouted out similar buildings. So the interesting thing about the zonage is that it was a 4-plex, but the neighbor was a 30-plex.
Yeah.
So it was like, what is this zonage? The neighbors were in between 16 units, 20 units, back down to duplexes, triplexes, again on a 40-plex. So it was very interesting to go see the neighbors. And that's when we actually found the property right in front, which
directly across the street. So you prospected pretty much the entire street. It's about like 300 meters long. How many properties do you think are on both sides of the street combined?
20. So 10 on each side, probably.
Oh, really?
Of the street.
Okay, I would have said a little bit more than that, but okay. So out of those 20, you researched every single one of them.
Yeah. So I researched every single one of them. I kept out the big plexes because that was already built. So I really focused on, there was maybe like 7 smaller than 5 units.
Yeah. So
those are really focused on. And that's when the apartment right in front, kind of called me up. It was an old lady, and she called me and said, "Can you meet me in the next hour?"
Wait. Okay, wait, because you're almost going too fast. So you prospected the whole street, and either by phone or when you couldn't get in touch with them by phone, you would send a letter. And then
Exactly.
finally, after what, like 3 weeks or a month, you got a phone call from one of the properties that you weren't able to reach the owner.
Exactly. So I kind of did a bit of scouting to find the property information of the owner, and I found this lady. Supposedly, the address was on the actual property, but I knew that she didn't live there. I door knocked. And that's when I sent a letter to. I found some random condo in downtown. That's where I sent a letter, and she called me back after 3 weeks. Apparently, she doesn't even live in the condo. She lived up north. She only
Oh,
does trips every 2 weeks to go downtown. So that's when she found my letter, called me up, and said, "I'm leaving town tomorrow. So can you meet me the next hour?"
wow.
so
And what
luckily,
happened?
so luckily I live 10 minutes away. So I was able to. My schedule was free. I was able to go meet her. And the first time I was visiting the property was her first time visiting in over 30 years.
In 30 years?
Yeah. So she owned it for about 35, 40 years. She lived in it in the first 5, 6 years until she moved out. She let her brother stay. And that's when the brother didn't properly manage it. And the building was in distress. You can call him like a collectioner or a hoarder, per se.
Let's say a collector. It's yeah, okay.
A collector. And so he occupied, it was a 5 unit. So the middle floor was a 7.5. And the two floors upstairs were 4.5s.
Okay, so wait, just to clear it out. So there was 4 floors. So a full semi-basement, which was a junkyard. And then
Mm-hmm.
the ground floor was a 7.5. So the entire floor, 1 unit, 4 bedrooms, filled with stuff. And then the 2 upper floors were cut in half and were two-bedroom apartments per floor.
Exactly, for a total
Okay.
of 5. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the collectionist, he basically hoarded all of the rooms. A 7.5 with a double living room and the full basement to the ceiling, basically. And he had some mental problems. You could see like writing on the walls. You could see junk everywhere that you wouldn't even recognize that was an apartment. And it was her first time actually diving deep into her brother's mental state, kind of.
Mhm.
And
Which must have been
yeah,
quite difficult for her.
she actually started when we got to the basement. There was a wall that he kind of broke down. It was like a cement wall that he wrote letters on, and he broke down, and she started crying on her first visit, and she kind of broke down in front of me, and it was very emotional for her, obviously. And she kind of told me a price range that she would be satisfied with.
Okay.
Obviously, she knew that there was problems, that the brother would have to move out, and so that was, I think, on Friday that we met. And the next Monday, that's when we met at my office, and I made her the offer to purchase.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh, so wait, just to
yeah.
backtrack a little bit. So her brother was occupying the whole ground floor. What about the other units? Were any of them rented?
So yeah, there was 4 other apartments, and 3 of them were rented. And they're pretty. The tenants were there for a long time. One has been there for 20 years. Others 7, 5 years, and they had very low rents. I mean,
Like
I'm
like
talking about
like how low?
4.5 in NDG would go probably for 1,100.
Yeah.
They were paying $400 per month.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Well, I mean, good for them for the time it lasted. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's just very far from the market, and so they're thinking, and they know they're getting a great deal. Is that at some point, there's going to have to be a realignment.
yeah, and so they kind of took advantage, in my opinion, of the brother's mental state. They knew that he had problems, and um, they took advantage. They were paying pennies, and that's that. And like I said, when the owner was visiting the apartments of the tenants, it was her first time also
Yeah.
meeting the tenants.
Okay.
I mean, if a tenant's been there for 20 years and it's the first time you meet him,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So going back, so I made her the offer purchase.
Mhm.
And we had agreed she wanted something between the municipal evaluation, which was about 800, and something between 400,000, which I don't know how she got the number. But I made her an offer. I made a low ball, kind of 450, I think. And she agreed.
Okay,
She agreed
so
on that price.
okay, wait, because this is important to specify. So we had worked on a project across the street, and the evaluation we got what for the land was 1.1 or 1.2. I don't even remember. Somewhere around there, 1.1, 1.2. And it was, that I recall, about 8,000 square feet. That land was just a little bit less. I think it was 7,500 square feet or 7,200 or something, with, it was in a bad state, but still a fully functional 5-unit standing on it. And municipal evaluation was 850 or 875.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, and you got it under contract. So we can say that it's worth 1.1, 1.2 any day,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you got it under contract at 450.
Yeah.
Wow. And then people say there's no deals to be made right now. Okay. Okay. I just want to clarify that. Okay. So you
Well,
got
it
on.
was a very niche property, right? The owner hasn't been there for 30 years. The state of, it was hoarded, all that. So I knew there was some sentimental part, and she just wanted to get rid of it. She said, "This is a financial liability. I don't know what my brother is gonna do there. I don't know if any day is gonna catch on fire.
Yeah.
So if anything happens to this building, I will be financially ruined for the rest of my life."
Liable and ruined. Yeah. Okay. So she
So
just wanted to get rid of it.
Exactly. She said, "I want to flip the page. I want to get rid of it. It's been too long."
Yeah. Yeah. So you're making her a favor, and we'll talk a little bit about this at the end in terms of like what are some of the lessons and some of the moral of the story and stuff. But in good prospecting, you find, distressed sellers are ideal, and this is a great example of how you are actually solving someone's problem.
Exactly. And so yeah, if we did an appraisal also on the land and on the building. And funny thing is, on the appraisal, they valued that the building destroyed and the potential of the land, because if we destroyed the building, we could potentially build up to like 20 units, right? Just like the one in front.
Yeah.
And so they valued that the land was worth more than the building.
Okay.
Which is funny.
Yeah.
And so the appraisal came out to about the same, 1.2, 1.3. And they didn't even evaluate the building itself.
Oh, really? It was just the land.
It was just the land. They said, "I can't evaluate this. There's too much work. The rents don't make sense. I can't do a revenue pro forma. I cannot do a comparison pro forma." So that's where we left it off.
But it's extremely reassuring to know that just the land is worth about 1.2 and you're buying it for a third of that price.
Exactly.
No. So then if I recall, I don't remember exactly the sequence, but then we still had the other one under contract. We basically told them that we weren't going to be able to close, so we didn't go further than the due diligence period. Thanked him, and then we moved to a project across the street. So then it was under contract. This was around what, like around March?
Yeah, exactly. It was around March. And I think that was one of the reasons, because, we knew we were playing neck to neck right in front. And we had another deal, a third of it on the other side. So that's when we're like, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Let's just drop it and move forward with the other project.
So that's what we did. And it took us quite a while to close, huh?
Yeah. So we had some problems with financing. I think this was around the time where they started increasing the interest rates. And this is also around the time where a lot of banks got scared or changing their policies. And we were working with this one particular bank, and they just played us around, I guess, because they also didn't know what was going to happen.
They asked for an extra document once in a while. They asked a question every 2-3 weeks to like string it along. And then, so this was back in March, and now we're in August, and we still haven't heard back from them. So luckily we found a solution to be able to close. So we took, do you want to explain how we structured it?
Sure. So the seller got kind of fed up at some point, and she's like, you need to close within 2 weeks, which was, understandable, from March to basically May,
July.
end of May. Yeah. And, she's like, I give you 2 more weeks. If not, I'm going to move along. And obviously I didn't want to move on. It was a gem in the rough. Yeah. So that's when we went private, we just decided, let's get the balance that we didn't have. Just go get private, figure out the plans, figure out the financing. And that's when we're going to make a move on it.
Mm-hmm. And so we actually closed it beginning of July. We brought in a partner, and we also went to a private lender. And so now it's under contract. And in the last month, actually, a lot has moved. Like, can you describe a little bit what you've been able to achieve?
Sure. So at first we didn't know what we wanted to do. Maybe we wanted to demolish and build a 20 unit, like the land is purposely for. Just running all the performers in either keeping the 5, building it. We knew that it wasn't the right time. Just building right now, and the interest rates that kept going up, it was too unstable of a project. Even though we had a great land lift, like I explained earlier, and that we just didn't want to get into a project that would have lasted maybe 2-3 years. Because nowadays cash is very valuable, and we want to move projects quite fast. So we thought, let's keep the 5, but let's try to optimize it as much as possible. So that's when we figured we can actually add 2 apartments in the basement. That was quite big. I think the floor area is 1,500. So we would basically...
And very high ceiling.
Very high ceiling, about 7-8 feet, which enters the bylaw. So we would make 2 apartments in the basement. The big 7.5 in the middle floor, we would subdivide and keep the 4.5s in the above floors, and transform a 5 unit to 8 apartments, basically.
And so this was one alternative. And the other alternative was to add a whole new construction in the back and add another 8 units to turn it into a 16. The problem with that is that the building is actually very close to the property line on both sides, and there isn't enough space to fit a vehicle, and access to the back is actually quite difficult. So in order to build something, add 3 or 4 floors, you need to bring in an excavator, you need to do some pilings, you need to do all that. And there's literally, the access is extremely difficult. So we settled on saying, let's transform that bad 5 unit into a nice 8.
Yeah, which is kind of ironic because we were looking at the zonage to build, right?
Yeah.
But in the end, it just didn't make sense. But no, so we decided to build an 8. Right now we're in permits phase. So we just finished the plans. We're about to submit the permits, and we're getting some quotes from contractors. We're going to build up a nice pro forma, detailed with the cost, etc., and present it to some banks to finally get some financing and move along.
And so in the last month, you've been able to clear out some of the collections and from the 2 floors, and the architect has drawn the plans, and we're almost ready for the permit application.
Exactly. And even the unhoarding the place was a whole adventure. So Axel was gone for a month in France, while I was 3 weeks deep in cleaning that place. I had some 2-3 guys working with me along the project. We basically filled 5 40-yard containers of junk, and then 2 20-yard containers of metal. And this took quite a long time. And it came to a point that it was a Friday after the 3 weeks, and I told myself, that's it, I can't do it anymore. Yeah. And we left the backyard. The backyard is still full, but at least the inside is empty.
Yeah, and that's going to be important for the engineers, for the architect, for the work to be able to start eventually, because we're not, a permit in that area could take easily 6 months. So it leaves us some time to complete the rest.
Exactly.
So now looking, because all this was over the span between project 1 and project 2 on the same street. That's over the span of what, like 8 months or something like that. Like, now looking back, what are some of the things that that you've learned or that you would do differently, or like what are some of the lessons learned?
The lessons learned, definitely budget to unhoard. So
Yes.
if next time you buy a hoarder house, budget a good 5-10K, because that it costs about that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very mental challenge. So I need to prepare myself next time. The other challenge or the other lesson is that, and this was before we dropped the deal on Le Grand One, and our acquaintance at the time that was helping with the performa, he actually said, well, how can you turn this around? And he had said, you have all these documents. Obviously, we had the evaluation report. We knew the area very well. And how can you turn this around to not make this a loss? And so that's when we prospected around the neighborhood with the zonage. And that's when we found the second project.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the lesson is whenever you find a deal or you purchase something, go to the immediate neighbors, get to know everybody around, and try to find a similar building, because you know what it's going to cost, you know what the purchase price is,
Mm-hmm.
the market, the rental market, and you can definitely make another deal out of your first.
Yeah. And you bring up a very good point. Like once we had all those documents, because we put several $1,000s into it, it's interesting to see like how is this going to turn into my advantage. And basically by prospecting and being persistent, you and sending that letter, she called you back, and you ended up finding a great property that maybe some other people would have given up, or they would have said, oh, I just couldn't find the owner. And those several thousands of dollars would have just been dropped and would have been a loss. Where in this case, we're able to transfer it onto another project and go from there. And for me, also one of the lessons is the value of good prospecting and follow up. And you spoke to pretty much everyone on the street, but that one property, and that's the one that we ended up buying. And so you could have dropped it and said, oh, that one was just too hard, I never got a hold of her. But the persistence is very, very important.
Yeah. And moral to that is that when we purchased it and I was cleaning out for about 3 weeks, there were so many people that were passing by, stopping their car. And even the immediate neighbors on the right and left, they thanked me.
Really?
They thanked me. They were like, it was a mess. We had notices from the city because of all the garbage in the backyard and all that. The firemen came during those 3 weeks, and they were saying, are you guys, we had a notice, we just wanted to do a follow-up. And I told them we're cleaning it. They're like, good, we're closing the file. The two immediate neighbors, they've been there also for 15 years, and they thanked me.
Wow.
So that was interesting to see.
Yeah. That's a good experience. And you must feel very proud to tell them like, hey, we just acquired the place. We're cleaning it up. We're going to renovate it. We're going to give it a new life. We're going to find some good tenants, and everyone's going to be happy in the neighborhood.
Yeah. I mean, living next to an eyesore, nobody wants that.
No. That's a great story, man. Thank you for sharing it. I've been wanting to record that episode for quite a while and share this good story. So I'm very proud to be a part of it, and that we closed back in July, and maybe every 6 months or once in a while we can come back on the show and give a bit of an update on where the project at. Again, right now all the plans are ready. We're just going to go to the city for permit application, so it's going to take us a while, and we have all the financing to take care of. So plenty more to come, and this episode to be continued.
All right, thank you.
Thanks a lot, man, for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for tuning in. Again, share it with a friend who might like this story. Reach out to me or to Simon. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and see how we can help. On this note, have a wonderful day. Thank you.